met since December. We've had a lot change since then, and I know that you all are really busy, so I want to thank you for coming to this meeting, taking time out of your busy day. The Nevada Freight Advisory Committee meets no more than quarterly or as needed. The purpose is to strengthen freight mobility and planning across Nevada. And today we have two great guest speakers that are going to share a presentation with us. And we're introducing some new members to our Freight Advisory Committee. So very quickly going over the agenda, we're going to start off with our stakeholder associations and give a warm welcome to our new FAC members. They represent the private sector, freight industry workforce, and academia. And since we are welcoming them, we're going to kind of skim back over the purpose of the FAC. We're going to get an update from Nathan at the Governor's Office of Economic Development with a quick recap of suggestions from our last meeting and kind of look at the changing landscape of freight in Nevada. Our first did my slide go away, or is it there? There it goes. Our first guest speaker is going to be Dr. Nicole Katsakides. I have a hard time saying your last name, Nicole. Say it for me.
Katsakides.
Katsakides. She is a highly respected, well-known freight research scientist. And our second guest speaker is Lieutenant Tappan Kornmesser. Oh.
I'm sorry, Desiree.
That's okay.
Sorry about that.
Let me get back to where we were. That's okay. Awesome. Following that, we're going to talk about the public-private partnerships and some ideas and some Q&A to address with all of you. So if you can put your name and organization, if you want to put your email in the chat. USDOT recommends that states use a collaborative process for freight planning involving relevant stakeholders by establishing a freight advisory committee as mandated by 49 USC 70201. The FAC enhances engagement of the public and private sector, and the stakeholders are supposed to include a cross-section of people from ports and freight railroads, if applicable, freight industry workforce, cargo carriers and logistics companies, academia, MPOs, local governments and economic development agencies, and other relevant freight planning groups. So we're going to try to keep the discussion going and have an interactivity at the end. But if you do have a brief comment or suggestion to share with the group, please feel free to enter it in the chat feature. If during you have a question for one of the guest speakers, please raise your hand and feel free to ask them a question. Our new private sector and freight industry workforce and academia additions to our FAC are Robert Scholes, New Market Advisors. He is with a Southern Nevada-based commercial broker. He handles retail logistics and site selection. I don't know if I saw Albert on there, but Dr. Albert Wang and Dr. Siri Park are from the University of Nevada Center for Advanced Transportation, Education, and Research. Michelle Kitchen, she has been accident-free commercial motor vehicle driver since 1988. She drives for Van Erden Trucking, and for the past 12 years has run a dedicated route from Michigan to the West Coast, servicing customers in Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and California. She serves on different freight roundtables in different states, including Michigan, Missouri, Arizona, Utah, and California. Chad Bruner is the Director of Real Estate for Love's Travel. Love's is a family-owned full-service truck stop chain with over 650 locations nationwide that serve professional drivers. Thor Herbst is a management associate project manager and third-generation member of the family-owned prominent Southwestern brand of gas stations, C-stores, and travel centers, Terrible Herbst. Next generation. He is active in the company's expansion and innovation, and he's also an exceptional off-road racer, continuing the family legacy, who are pioneers in desert racing. Jacob Mass, Jacob, I'm not sure if I'm saying your last name correctly, and Brad Peterson are with Maverick. That is the largest independent fuel marketer in the Intermountain West. Maverick locations are a favorite for their fresh food options and fleet card program. And finally, Hayden Juzek, Senior Director of Fleet Operations at ITS Logistics. They are one of North America's fastest growing asset-based modern 3PLs. They have their ITS Logistics portfolio features North America's number 18 asset-light freight brokerage. They have a really long portfolio of things that they're doing. They're doing just about everything in the logistics space. So our last overarching themes from our meeting in December was participation, bring ideas, offer feedback, collaborate with others, and be inclusive, because everybody's freight needs are a little bit different. We heard from Nellis and Creech Air Force Base, and JJ was not able to come to this meeting. So as members of the Freight Advisory Committee, you all play a vital role in shaping the future of freight in Nevada, and your collective knowledge and insight are essential to maintaining a safe and efficient, economically vital freight system in Nevada. These are our key freight planning goals, to include strategic planning, build strong partnerships, advance project development, and ensure compliance with federal requirements. The National Highway Freight Program is a federal aid formula program, and it was established by Congress in the 2015 FAST Act to improve the efficient movement of freight. It was expanded under the bipartisan infrastructure law to provide increased funding and flexibility for states to invest in critical infrastructure that enhances safety and efficiency for freight-focused infrastructure projects that support economic competitiveness and supply chain resilience. State freight planning documents go through a FHWA review and approval to be eligible for funding. The state freight plan has to be updated every 4 years, and we are due to update it here in 2026. It will include all new requirements, and we will be presenting it to the Freight Advisory Committee, you all, to get your input as it starts getting put together over the next year. There are other documents that we will ask for your input. They are the critical urban and rural freight corridor designations. That's already been updated for the 2026 freight plan. And then the freight investment plan, which is something we're going to see later in this presentation to get your input. These documents, the critical urban and rural freight corridors and the freight investment plan, can be updated annually. The freight investment plan is subject to change, and they do go to FHWA for approval. So National Highway Freight Program funds can only be spent on facilities that are identified on the National Highway Freight Network. These are Nevada's freight corridors. They're indicated on the map here. And the National Highway Freight network. It consists of the National Highway Freight Network, the primary highway freight system in blue, other interstate portions that are not on the primary highway freight system are in pink. And then the critical urban freight corridors are in yellow, and then green for the rural freight corridors. There is a limit on the miles that can be included in this network. NDOT used a data-driven and performance-based approach to designate these in 2023, and that analysis included truck GPS data that NDOT purchased and highway performance monitoring system truck counts. NDOT worked closely with all of the NPOs in Nevada as these were designated in 2023. If anybody would like to know more about these corridors, to get details on them or see the FHWA acceptance letter, you can find it on the NDOT website where the blue arrow points down. There is a link that you can look up that and get more information. So right now I want to give Nathan from the Governor's Office of Economic Development the opportunity to give us an update.
Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? I hope your weekend was good. My name's Nathan Bouvet. I'm the Strategic Project Manager here for the Governor's Office of Economic Development. When I was asked to provide a 3 to 5 minute update on everything that GOED's doing, that could be kind of a daunting task, right? With everything that we do at the state level and trickling all down to how it impacts local governments and regional governments. I thought it was best that I put together more of an overview. So if I refer to my notes during my update, my apologies, but I want to stay on point and within the time frame given, and also give everybody here a really good overview of GOED and things that we do on a given day specific to transportation. For some of you that may or may not be aware, GOED was born back in 2011 as a result of the Great Recession. At that time, a SWOT analysis was conducted, and it broke down a series of target industries, which include everything from advanced manufacturing, information technology, natural resources, hospitality and creative industries, and transportation and logistics. Today's update, or rather a high-level overview, as I referenced just a moment ago, it's going to focus on transportation and logistics. This target industry in itself includes everything from warehousing, wholesaling, trucking, rail, air, and multimodal hubs. With that being said, and one of the aspects I was asked to present is GOED's objectives, or what I would refer to as current high priority objectives. And this list can be vast, but I narrowed it down specific to transportation and logistics. This includes everything from supporting development of multimodal inland ports, developing tech-ready industrial parks, identifying private sector investment opportunities for freight, supporting statewide infrastructure developments, and supporting expansion of broadband infrastructure. As we had just talked about a moment ago, the state plan, or the current state plan, highlights the opportunity for a variety of things, including the electric, innovative, and connective Nevada. The connective piece has much to do with transportation and logistics, and that's kind of what I'm going to focus on today. But more specifically, to give you an example, wholesaling and warehousing, that comprises an overwhelming majority of logistics industry in Nevada, right? So when you combine that with trucking, rail, and multimodal hubs, that sector represents almost 10% of all jobs in Nevada. Manufacturing is one of the fastest growing industries in the state, which is good for transportation and logistics companies because those goods need to go somewhere. Consistent with the state plan, there's a variety of documents that include the state rail plan, the Nevada freight plan, the freight rail strategic plan, and the passenger rail strategic plan. And all those documents all play their respective parts on any given day here at GOED. Some of the primary goals of these plans, and I'm not going to get into too much detail, includes, but it's not limited to, Everything from integrating rail and truck transportation, mitigating the negative transportation impacts of industrial development, improving the safety and reliability of freight transportation, and so on. When I first started here at GoEd, I guess 15 months ago, I did a lot of research specific to freight rail and truck freight as well. And I came up with some interesting percentages. And to give you some of that breakdown, currently 77% of freight tonnage is carried by trucks. The U.S. is well known for having probably what's considered the most robust freight rail system in the world. And it attracts revenue of about $80 billion a year. When you compare that to the trucking industry is over an $800 billion a year industry. Currently, 70% of trucks in the entire state are moving to and from California. And an interesting fact is less than 4% of all ground freight moving in the state is by rail to or from Nevada businesses. So there's a huge opportunity for growth specific to freight rail. So what does that all mean to us and what I'm presenting today? Well, intermodal and carload rail services between Nevada and California, it's limited. Intermodal and carload rail service between Nevada and the rest of the country is limited. Rail service between Nevada businesses is practically non-existent, and the last figures I came up with was roughly 644 rail cars per year. And then lastly, rail service in Nevada is 83% through traffic and primarily serves commerce outside the state. So specific to freight, GoEd's goal in this regard is to initiate and expand new intermodal services and expand freight rail service to and from California and points east. Now that list isn't all inclusive, but I wanted to highlight those two aspects. Some of GoEd's economic development tools and programs, anything from business development programs, workforce development programs, community development programs, and so forth. Specific to business development programs, that includes everything from tax incentives, innovation-based economic development, the Knowledge Fund, and so on and so forth. For example, GoEd continues to build upon the relationship with Utah's Inland Port Authority, which has already proven useful to increase the potential impact of both Jean and Fernley inland ports. The focus or the research or the meetings with them included everything from idea flows, missing commodities, discussions involving designated truck parking areas, infrastructure improvements, funding sources, and so on. But essentially, the goal was to see how Nevada could capitalize on implementing inland ports or having an inland port authority consistent with what Utah has done, what Washington has done, what Idaho has done, and they've been a huge resource in everything that we do. In conclusion, and things that I think that FAC would like to keep their eye on, and given the sense of time, I'm just going to highlight respective Assembly bills and Senate bills. And if anybody has any questions specific to those, feel free to send a message in the chat. And I can definitely respond to any questions. But first you have AB 28. This is specific to the fuel tax. This is an existing law, essentially to support certain transportation projects. You have Assembly Bill 32, which is specific to the Virginia and Truckee Railway. You have the Assembly Bill 256, or the Transit Bill. You have AB 462, that's specific to inland ports. This is also existing law that sets forth the Inland Port Authority Act. You also have AB 446, or the Rail Safety and Operations Bill. You have Senate Bill 364, which is specific to rail abatements. And then lastly, you have the Governor's Bill, or Senate Bill 461. Desiree, I hope that kind of just broke down a really high level overview of everything that we've done or where we're at, but we're moving forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. So very quickly, I asked Amanda for Hilton from Nevada Mining Association for an update. She said that there is a lot of positive momentum in the mining sector, though many of the proposed projects are several years out. So there's no immediate demand or changes for the freight mobility Just like a side note for everyone that's not from Nevada to know, there's over 20 critical minerals that come from Nevada that include gold, silver, copper, lithium, and silica. And then Michael Chabonneau provided this, this map and a little overview of the Port of Nevada. Port of Nevada is an intermodal and bulk transload rail yard. The site handles over 20 different commodities and 20 containers. It currently handles 240 containers per week. With the support of the Union Pacific service to the facility, it will soon be increasing service to 6 days per week, and this is going to allow for an increase of 420 containers per week. They expect to have over 50,000 feet of rail by 2027, allowing them to handle 3,000 truckload equivalents per week. And these little side notes, last winter, we saw nearly 700 hours of chain control and over 100 hours of closures on I-80, according to Caltrans. Commercial motor vehicle user delay costs were near $8 million in peak winter months. Port of Nevada aims to reduce I-80 road repair costs, the risk of crashes, and risks to drivers with environmentally friendly way to create more desirable dray jobs for Nevada and more revenue for Nevada as well. So thank you, Michael, for that update. So this is the first quarter of freight mobility performance for commercial motor vehicles in Nevada. The target is 1.50, and we are at 1.25 year to date. So that's good. Nevada has historically been seen as a pass-through state for freight, with goods primarily moving through its highways on the way to other destinations. However, it's also a large consumption state, since everyday products like food, fuel, and pharmaceuticals are not manufactured here, and they have to be transported in. This is a visual graphic. It's a trend map that I made with some tutoring from Nicole. Thank you, to learn how to do this. And this is actually commercial motor vehicle traffic that traverses Nevada corridors. It's coming from across I-80. It's coming from up in Idaho. It's coming from down in the southern border. It's using National Performance Management Research data set, probe data that comes from the vehicles. So as Nevada's economy has diversified, we are increasingly becoming a freight origin. This change is going to highlight the state's role in manufacturing and warehousing and distribution, driven by strategic investments like Nathan mentioned. So that means that our infrastructure has to improve. Our proximity to the West Coast major ports makes us very important to the freight network because of the connectivity to California and our position in the Southwest. And as I-11 is constructed, this is going to be even more vital for the state of Nevada. So these are the 2025 freight system projections, 163 billion tons of freight valued at $193 billion. That's 43.5% of Nevada freight flows that are projected to move just to and from California. It is $69.7 billion value. By 2030, the total trade in Nevada is projected to increase to 142.4 billion, with freight movement by truck increasing 14%. So here we are with our first guest speaker, Nicole, and I'm going to let her share her slides and tell you about her expertise. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Desiree. Hi, everyone. I'm not capable of doing two things at once, so bear with me while I share my screen here for you. And I hope my computer will cooperate well on Teams. Hold on, I just need to flip it. Okay, can you all see that okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right, perfect. Well, hi everyone. I'm Nicole Katsakidis. I'm currently with FMCSA, but I think my time is running out this week due to what's happening. I'm sure you all have seen things in the news, and it's been a wonderful opportunity to serve my country. I'm not sure where I'm going to land exactly, but I hope to continue to be doing work in freight and truck parking, which is what I'm known for. I've been working on truck parking issues for a really long time in my career. And that's how I got to know Desiree. I started, when I was at Federal Highway Administration in the freight office, I managed the first Jason's Law report. And if you're not familiar with Jason's Law, I'm going to talk about it in my presentation a little bit. But I was able to meet Desiree because she and Real Women in Trucking were real instrumental in helping us reach thousands of truck drivers to fill out a survey to help us understand the issues and challenges of truck parking, and to write that report, which really led to a lot of things that we were able to do at the federal level to try to help improve the truck parking situation. But I've been at this issue for a long time in various roles, and I find it extraordinarily complex. So Desiree asked me to come and talk to you all about it today, and I'm just gonna, I know you've heard about truck parking. I heard Nathan talk about truck parking, but I want to see if I can't contribute some new ideas or new thoughts, because it's such a complex topic. You wouldn't think that truck parking is so hard to solve, but it really is a challenging situation. It's very complex, very multi-dimensional. So just backing up a little bit, just thinking about the economy and just thinking about what's happening, thinking about the world, and then where truck parking fits in. Freight movement, freight and logistics is really ever evolving. It's very dynamic, and things are changing very rapidly. I mean, they're not only changing now politically with some of the tariffs and different. I've spent a little bit of time this morning reading some articles about Canada and some of the trucking companies not sure what to do, stay or go sort of thing in terms of whether or not they should um, book movements or not, given some of the tariff situation. But even before that, consumers are really changing. Technologies are changing very rapidly, more so in the past several years than in the prior 50 years. People want things differently. We've heard about e-commerce for several years now. Think people want things more on demand at their fingertips. And there's a lot more about like in-home production and 3D printing and just kind of having things right now, this urgency that we never really had before. And these changes in how we move freight and what we do in the freight industry is really going to follow what is lucrative. So, for example, I spent a lot of time working for Texas A&M Transportation Institute and helping Texas DOT with their connected and automated vehicle plan for freight. And what we really heard from the companies, and there was in the news today, Aurora is now going to have a no driver trucking operation between Houston and Dallas, and they got the green light to get going. But what I learned in working with that effort and talking to different companies is that if they find it very lucrative, they're going to do it. And there were several companies that several years ago had worked with a professor, Pascal Van Hendrick, out of Georgia Tech, and he ran some computer optimization or route optimizations for how freight moves when it's automated. And it showed returns or improvements by over 30% in profit. So you can bet that as technology changes and we start to see things become more automated, we're going to see big changes in how freight moves, and quickly, depending on how lucrative it is. And when you see this kind of change in the economy and change in how things go, in the transportation world, we often talk about system focus versus project focus. And by system focus, what I mean is we hear a lot, especially when we're at big meetings, Transportation Research Board, about needing to think about the entire system, needing to think about a whole corridor between states and how everything works together. But in reality, is that really how we do things from an economic development perspective? And you have a lot of states, a lot of local governments trying to do their own thing, trying to land that company to come to their location, trying to, bring all the business to one location. We're not really doing economic development at a system level. So while we're talking about transportation at a system level, we're doing a lot of projects at a more local level or state level. And there's winners and losers in economic development. And the reason why I want to talk about this, even if it's a little half-baked in my presentation, is that when you have that kind of apparatus, when you have economic development occurring the way it occurs, and then you want to talk about a system approach, it's kind of hard to plan for the right investments that are going to serve everybody or hit everybody. And I'm a big believer that as we do transportation planning, including if we're planning for truck parking, we really need to map out and look at where economic development is occurring everywhere and try to fit and work with our federal partners to try to fit where projects need to go or where you need to have technology infrastructure that's going to support everybody or try to best bring all of that project level stuff together. I'm going to step off of that now because I can get long-winded on that topic, but it's something I think we need to consider. And when it comes to truck parking and we ask, well, where should we put truck parking? That's kind of one of the things we look at the federal level is, well, where do you have a big need for it? Where's the demand? Where's the growth? And, how do you serve the kind of a non-systemic development when you are trying to have a systemic transportation infrastructure? Also, the last thing I want to say is there's a huge mix of public and private infrastructure and a real need to understand that level of evolution. So I'll try to speed up here a little bit, but what that means for communities is that there can be suddenly increased demands or changes for freight routes and facility uses. There needs to be a movement closer to consumers, less retail stores, more retail hubs. There's a lot of focus on technology implementation. And I really believe that states and local governments need to be in lockstep with planners, economic developers, labor programs, education, et cetera. And that's really important. And I know that Desiree is working really hard to do that in Nevada. So what does all this mean for truck parking? So just with that kind of context, we're seeing an increased demand in truck parking. We're seeing more truck parking challenges exacerbated, more short-term parking and long-term parking. Lots of times when people think about truck parking, they think about the overnight need, but there's still a short-term bio break, 30-minute rest need that's necessary. And as you have a shift from kind of over the road to these more like closer to the consumer hubs, then you're going to have more delivery drivers who need more short-term parking. And that's where you start to see a lot of times those drivers on residential roads or waiting in areas not really designed for them. There can be increased congestion, which is going to challenge where truckers plan to park. A lot of times truckers will say, I plan to park, I'm going 5 hours, I plan to park at these locations. But if there's an increase in congestion, then they might not make it that far. And all of a sudden they find themselves needing to park someplace they weren't expecting. And do they know if there's any spaces there? And if they can't find spaces or they can't figure that out, then they park in places that are undesignated for them. There's also a very challenging work environment. I mean, we talk a lot about automation. I hear all the time people say, well, if you're going to have automation, do you still need truck parking? Yes. For the foreseeable future, you're still going to have a lot of human drivers. This evolution, even though companies are going to invest in automation, there's still going to be a need for that. And there's a real need, and you can look at TxDOT's CAV plan to be thinking about these concepts of transfer hubs and how truck parking today and this kind of conservation of right-of-way along highways can help with this transfer of freight from one vehicle to another, whether it's driven by a human or not. So there's a lot of impacts for trucking to figure out and to think about. Why truck parking? Why is it so important? Isn't this a private sector problem. I can't tell you, I've worked for Maryland DOT as an actual Maryland DOT staffer. I've been an academic researcher that supported TxDOT in other states, and I've heard so many DOT folks say, why is this our problem? Why can't the private sector solve this problem? This is a private sector problem. We're going to leave it alone. I've heard many politicians say that too, many council people in Baltimore County, where I used to live. There were a lot of county council folks who were upset with truckers parking in communities and residents calling. And they said, well, let's just ban truck parking. We're just going to ban it. And so they did that, and they exacerbated the problem. And in their deliberations, they even said, this is a private sector problem. Flying J needs to solve this, not us. And when I was working for Maryland DOT, I finally had some discussions with some of these people, and I showed them the data of where trucks were parking, and they were like, oh my gosh, these trucks are supporting our businesses, but there's no place for them to park, so they're irritating my constituents. And so then they became partners and saying, okay, let's find places for these trucks to go, which still it hasn't ended up with great solutions, but I'm a true believer that until you can see the data, it's really hard to engage people in truck parking. So let's talk about the current truck parking landscape. 98% of drivers report difficulty finding parking. There's really only one parking space per 11 trucks. That's based on work with the Jason's Law truck parking study that the Federal Highway Administration did. Most rest areas are generally full. Drivers then park in places that aren't designed for them, whether it's illegally or dangerously on ramps and shoulders. They don't want to be there, but that's generally where they park because it seems like that's where they can go. There's a lot of lost productivity when drivers are trying to figure out parking. It adds, and there's a cost in fuel and time that generally gets passed on eventually to consumers. And lack of truck parking can really mess up supply chain delays and inefficiency, especially, and I teach logistics and supply chain at a community college and here in Baltimore where I am. And we talk about this a lot, how, just in time, we're trying to make everything more efficient. But then when you have this truck parking problem, that is very inefficient, and it is one of the challenges in a modern supply chain that we haven't been able to solve. I want to kind of keep things going because I don't want to get too long-winded on some of these things, but there's a huge parking demand right now. And even if things move to automation, there's still going to be a need for space for that transfer of the freight from one automated vehicle to another. So you still need to be looking at the future, but there's really not a lot of space for this. And the challenge is that it's a market failure. So and what I mean by that is, and you're probably like, why isn't Pilot or Flying J building more parking? It's not lucrative. They don't make money off of it. They find that especially in urban areas where land use costs are high, they can't afford it. The return on investment is not good. I've had a lot of conversations with a company called Sheets. They're a convenience store. They build facilities here on the East Coast. I'm not sure about Nevada. And they were telling me that they want to include more truck parking, but they can only include so much for the footprint that they have. And they don't, they said it would be great if the state of Maryland, for example, could offset their land use costs, and then they would build more truck parking. But because it's not lucrative for them and they don't make money off of truck parking, then it becomes a government problem because it's a market failure. They're not solving the problem. And then there's also this issue with the fact that companies don't reimburse drivers for parking. So drivers aren't always getting paid. Some do, some don't. And there is a bit of a debate about a paid parking model and how that affects drivers and how that eventually gets passed on in rates and then to the consumer. I'm not going to spend more time on that because we could easily spend all our time on the economics of truck parking. But I'm just going to sum it up by saying that it is a market failure, so the public sector has been trying to handle it. However, one big group of people that don't want any truck parking, despite trucks touching their lives every single day, is all of us. The NIMBYs, the not in my backyard. Nobody wants truck parking in their community. And it's amazing to me how a truck parking facility can come up in a planning and zoning meeting, and it could be maybe a mile from a residential area. Those people would never hear it, they'd never see it. but they will go in droves with pitchforks to say, I don't want this near my community. There's a really fascinating community meeting that you can watch on YouTube if you Google Washington County, Maryland, truck parking 2021. It's November 2021, I think. And there was a 2-hour just session of people coming out saying, and this facility that this company wanted to build was not really right next to residential. It was in town in an industrial area. And people just came out and said, you know, truckers do human trafficking, it causes cancer. I mean, I'm just amazed at all of the things. And I know I'm a bit of an advocate for the drivers, and I would not want a truck parking facility right next to my house either. But I do believe that there are solutions. I also believe that constituents, NIMBYs, all of us need a better appreciation of how we rely on trucking every single day. And that's something I kind of look at the trucking industry and kind of like, what are you doing about this? We really need some changes in perspective, but the NIMBY problem is a huge challenge. Additionally, it's hard. It's hard to find money for truck parking. If states build truck parking, they can't, there's no money for operations and maintenance that they can use. The interstate commercialization ban says that you can't have private sector build and charge for parking or even charge for services on interstates except in grandfathered places. So that makes it hard for states to engage or to try to figure out some sort of public-private partnership with the private sector. And then generally with the funding that's available to states through the federal government, that funding isn't terribly flexible. The trucking industry has kind of like put the crown on the head of states and said, you're the champion for truck parking. But they have, you know, it's hard for states to build truck parking without getting through some of these impediments. With that said, there are some best practices out there. I think I just went through some of the root causes with you, so I'll go on with this slide. But, you know, when you don't have safe parking for drivers, you have drivers parking in places that they shouldn't be, that aren't good for them. There's an increased risk of theft and cargo and loss when drivers are in places that aren't authorized for them. There's a lot of wasted fuel and time, and then an economic loss for drivers and companies. I could not do truck parking presentation without talking about Jason Rivenberg and his wife Hope. Jason was a truck driver who was killed after parking in a place that he had heard from other drivers was safe for him to park in South Carolina. He made his delivery window early. The company wouldn't let him deliver, so he parked in this abandoned gas station and he was murdered for just the $7 that he had on him. Now, I've worked in government a long time and I have never seen a policy or law change as quickly as this one, especially by someone with no experience in government. And the lady that you see with the white jacket, Hope Rivenberg, she worked with after her husband died, very quickly after he died, she went to her congressman and was able to work with people like Desiree and other trucking groups and people that from a grassroots perspective to get a law passed in her husband's name called Jason's Law, which requires the United States Department of Transportation to focus on this and to be able to do something about truck parking. So every couple of years a report is due. It's called the Jason's Law Report, and it requires USDOT to focus on truck parking. Since we did the first one, we've been able to see a surge in states and just this focus on truck parking funding, best practices. There's the National Coalition on Truck Parking, and we've been able to peel away at the layers of the onion. It's still hard to meet the demand, but I think things are going in the right direction. Still, there's just so much more that needs to be done. But when we did the first Jason's Law study and then the second one, we found that there are problems with truck parking in every state and region at all times of day, all times of the week, all times of the year, especially along major freight corridors. We're seeing that truck parking information systems, technology systems are important and are emerging as a way to tell drivers where parking exists. But there's only, it's a really small number, 7% of all spaces in the United States are outfitted with some sort of truck parking information system. So we've got a long way to go there. But the study, I think if you have time, take a look at it. There's a lot of good information out there. I toy with this slide a lot because I wonder, are states the best champions? I really do think that we need to start couching the truck parking problem as something different. We need to maybe relabel it, rename it, talk about it in different ways because it really is important for all of us, but we don't, most people just don't care about it. And I think we need to make some changes, really scrutinize these funding laws, the funding that states are able to get, and ways to work with the private sector because it's very difficult to actually do something and to make improvements. I talked about NIMBY challenges, so I'm going to skip it. So what are communities doing? Some communities are adding capacity. A lot of communities are trying to a lot of states try to restripe existing lots. There are states that have used federal funding to build truck parking, but again, they can't use any federal funding to operate or maintain it, so it becomes a burden on the state budget. There are some private sector best practices. What you're looking at here is a trucking company, DM Bowman. They have created paid truck parking around industrial property that they own. They charge a nominal fee. Truckers use it a lot, but they did get quite a lot of community pushback despite being clearly in a residential area. So there are some companies that are trying to do something about this. There's information systems. A lot of states are trying to look at truck parking information systems. Those have some challenges. A lot of states are trying to visualize truck parking. What I mean by that is showing where trucks are parking on a map so that people can get their heads around where the demand is. And there's some model codes. There's in Lehigh Valley, over my way, they are looking at how when an economic development project is built, they code in a specific number of spaces to serve those projects so that the drivers have some place to park in communities that are, especially those drivers that are serving the businesses in these areas. But there's a lot of challenges. States, a lot of times you have to work with the local governments on these types of projects, and the locals are like, no, my constituents hate this, I'm not going to do it. So it's really hard when you have that level of coordination to get anything done. I don't believe that throwing money at the problem solves the problem. I think you have to actually change how the money can be used and some other laws in order to give states the flexibility to actually do something. And truck parking information systems are interesting because that seems like a great answer, at least to help drivers know where parking is. However, the technology gets outdated so fast that states find themselves in a position where they have to almost replace the entire system in a couple years, and they don't have a way to charge for it and be able to have operation and maintenance funding. So that is a big challenge with TPIMs. Let me just kind of move through this quickly because I know I'm kind of coming up on time, but if you're not familiar with TPIMs, truck parking information systems, it's a way to convey real-time information to drivers. All of them that exist right now have had some form of government funding. They are they are struggling. A lot of states are struggling with maintaining them and keeping the technology up to date. Private sector locations do have their own, for proprietary reasons. They have said they don't really want to share their information, so that becomes a challenge. You don't have like one place you can go to get all of these feeds. One big project that I had gotten funded that I hoped to see to fruition, but I'm not sure about, is we just got the funding in November, is a truck parking data exchange, where we were going to work with everybody to try to figure out how to get more states outfitted with TPIMs and how to have one feed that was current, updated, and accurate for drivers to be able to receive that through whichever way they prefer. And by feed, I mean like, where can I park? The other challenge with a lot of the TPIM systems is that it's not giving you predictive information. So there are researchers out there. Jack Kong at Texas A&M Transportation Institute, he's a leader in trying to use data to predict what might be available and how these systems can integrate that, because the driver might say, okay, it looks like there's 10 spaces now, but by the time I get there, is it going to be full? And then I'm going to be stuck without a place to park. So that's a challenge with these systems that I wanted to point out. there's some visualization work that's being done. Texas and Maryland have been leaders in this space where, I mean, a lot of states have truck parking plans where they have a static display of where trucks are parking based on different data sources. But Texas and Maryland have a continuously updated visualization tool that Texas A&M Transportation Institute built. In full disclosure, I used to work there, and so I was able to make these tools and was on the brink of making a national one at USDOT, but it wouldn't be as granular as what states are doing themselves. And by granular, I mean it would be way more high level, and like states are able to kind of drill down to the latitude, longitude of some of these things. But these types of tools using what we call truck probe data, which is the actual GPS signal that we're pulling from onboard navigation or telematics devices, can be used to show where demand is. And then you can layer in other information. So in Texas, they look at where do they have demand, and then where do they have pockets of economic development, where do they have actual truck parking locations, and do you have demand near where you have spaces available. So there's tools like this that I think are really helpful in working with local governments and being able to drill down and say, here's what your parking situation looks like. And not all the parking is going to be because of the businesses in your area, but a lot of times what happens an hour away might have a huge impact on the number of trucks that are parking in your community. So the research that has come out of this visualization has shown that there's like this ripple effect. So if you build a big warehouse and distribution center in one location, it might drive demand for parking 2 hours out, 5 hours out, and so forth. And that's really kind of, it gets back to that systemic look versus the project look that I wanted to kind of leave with you. This is Maryland's version. They get a little more granular, and you can drill down into each one of these blocks and kind of see things down to the street level, and they look at usage rates and such. So I just want to, and you can, the link is in there. So if you get this presentation, you can go to the link and check this out. And most states have the data to do this. It's a byproduct of data they're already getting to measure congestion. And so it's pretty easy for states to take the data and work with someone to get it visualized. So these weren't expensive tools, I wanted to say, very cheap. Because I was at Maryland, Maryland has done a lot of things with truck parking. So I apologize for all the Maryland examples, but it's just, something, a byproduct of me being there. But Maryland's tried to do a lot where they've mapped excess property that the State Highway Administration owns, and they've given it a score for whether or not it could support truck parking. So it got a high score if it was not near residential, if it had pavement already, if there was some decent access to it, and that sort of thing, if it was near an industrial area. So they developed some criteria and then scored all the excess property that they had that they weren't using, a lot of it on highway right away. And then they said, okay, let's go out and try to get the private sector to, maybe we could sell it to them for $1 and they'll build the truck parking. So that's kind of where Maryland is right now. And they created this roadmap, this P3 roadmap, to really try to work with the private sector to see if they couldn't get, where do we have property near existing private lots or industry that would be willing to engage. So they're working to try to do that now. So I just want to give you a snapshot of their thing. And kind of one of the last two things I wanted to mention to you is that the private sector doesn't like to build parking, but they've figured out that they can make money off of selling drivers information. So to me, this is interesting because in my opinion, and I'm probably being more candid than I should, it's drivers don't want to pay for parking, but they'll pay for an app. And I don't know the difference in the cost of the app, and Desiree's probably cringing right now, but I think, these apps, they purport to give drivers information. None of them have really good information about where there's parking available because, as I mentioned, with TPIMs, there's not a lot of spaces outfitted. But they are trying to, like Truck Parking Club is working with community. They have an interesting idea, and truckers are upset with it because Truck Parking Club ends up with a paid parking model. But what they've done is they've gone to people throughout the United States and said, you own an industrial lot and at night it's empty. How about making a few bucks? and they have like an Airbnb system for truckers where the truckers can reserve a spot on somebody's industrial property and they know they have parking. And so you can go to Truck Parking Club and you can go to their map and see where the spot is and what kind of amenities, if any, are available. It is a paid parking model, and so there's a big debate about whether this is good or not. However, they will argue that even some private mom and pop truck parking locations are engaging with them because they realize they have to start charging for parking. So you get back to that debate. I don't want to step into that because that's a messy one and a muddy one, but it's a hard one, and it's coming. It's something we have to talk about. So I have some questions here. Are these helpful? Will we see greater problems if things are monetized? Are they, some of these apps are really selling equipment storage, not really spaces. And then the last thing I'll say is there's one that truck drivers use ubiquitously. It's the most used app. And for the longest time, it was owned by Chinese Facebook. And so there's cybersecurity issues where you have some of these apps owned by foreign adversaries, and our truck drivers are putting in information and sharing, and they can see all the routes. They can see, whoever's behind the app can see such rich supply chain information that we can't even see in the United States. So when you think about cyber vulnerability and even backdoor applications like some of the Maersk things that happened a couple years ago, and the ability to access all systems because of a vulnerability in an app or something like that. When you start thinking about apps and cyber, it adds a layer of complexity to truck parking. And so I think, that's something that we also need to talk about. Emergency response analysis, and this is my kind of last area. I was involved when the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapsed in Baltimore, and one of the big challenges was, oh my gosh, there's no truck parking. Now we have all these trucks with no place to go, and they have to wait for a while because they can't get them out of here, or they're going to be taking freight from the port. There's no truck parking. What do we do? And so there's a real need for emergency truck parking, for states to have kind of auxiliary lots ready to go, emergency leases with big box stores or stadiums or people who have big lots to say, hey, if there's an emergency, I need to use your lot. And so some sort of emergency lease in place. None of that was in place with FSK. It could have been so useful. And by the time I went and tried to work with the state of Maryland to get access to certain big box properties, it was too late and too cumbersome to do it. I think there's some solutions. Just to wrap up here, I think I talked about a lot of solutions here, but we do need to expand capacity. We do need to find places. We have to figure out how to incentivize private investment. We need to figure out how to get technology rolled out and paid for in such a way that it's not getting outdated within a matter of years. We've got to work with the local governments on zoning policies, economic development. We really need to look at these industrial areas and how growth impacts the demand for parking locally, but also in that ripple effect that I mentioned. We've got to look at this commercialization ban and figure out how we can get better maintenance and operations funding for parking capacity and TPIMs, and make funding more flexible and private sector oriented. So with that, this is my personal contact information because I'm not really sure where I'm going to be. This topic is near and dear to my heart, and if you'd like to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn, and here's my personal information, and very happy to answer any questions. I hope I didn't put you all to sleep. Normally my family and everybody I know runs away and I start talking to
Mine too.
Nicole,
I think I have it. I think I gotta find out about sound. Yeah.
Any questions?
Michelle Glickard.
Yeah, so hello everyone, Michelle Glickard. I'm with the Tahoe MPO. What an eye opener. And I think it's one of those things that you sort of think about sometimes when you're doing your planning, but you're right. I don't know that, our larger kind of regional transportation planning documents have this sort of detail. I know ours doesn't. So Tahoe isn't on the route on the map, right? We're up here in the mountains, but the minute 80 closes down, guess what we see and feel, right? We're the alternative. So I definitely know that we kind of missed the mark in the RTP that's out currently, but I can commit to doing a better job next time, because I think that we will be seeing that as the weather, as we already see it today, when once the weather gets bad and then they come into Tahoe and then maybe the weather ends up, bad here. And now we need a place for them to sit while the weather clears. I could totally see the connection at sort of a larger kind of MPO planning. It feels like that might be the right place for us to be thinking about it in a better way, is in that regional planning network that we have and that we do. And then that kind of trickles then down to the locals, and where you actually start maybe having them consider something like that. And I won't say, like I said, Tahoe is really more of that emergency side of it. Like that's what we see, is when the things start to shut down on the main network, we're sort of that secondary piece. But now I just found it super valuable. And I think the MPOs should be a part of that planning that you're talking about, and that consideration could happen at our level.
Yes, and I realize I wasn't the MPOs that I've worked with. MPOs are a critical part, and I apologize that I didn't mention MPO. That was a failure on my part. The Baltimore MPO, the Maryland MPOs, even the Texas ones that have been involved in the work that I've been fortunate to do, have been critical, and they are, real critical to working with the local governments and getting to some of those planners that are, decision makers that need to be part of that discussion. So thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Okay. So you have Nicole's contact information if you guys want to connect with her or ask her any questions in the chat. Nicole, are you gonna stay around, or do you have to? Okay.
Yeah, I might need to leave in an hour, but I have to go teach my class. But I'll stick around.
Okay. We'll be done before that.
Yeah, I think
so.
yeah, I think it's
Okay.
fine. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
So I'm gonna advance my slide here to get back to our next guest speaker, Lieutenant Tappan Kornmesser. So let me just advance up. It took me all the way back to the beginning. So Tappan, if you'd like to take over your bio, I won't read the whole thing. I'll leave it up there while you talk and let you go so that we can get right to it.
Everybody hear me okay? Desiree, can you hear me okay?
I can't hear you very good. Can you guys hear him?
No,
Yeah.
not at all.
A little bit. It's low.
Okay, I will try and speak up. I had to step out of the office, so I'm in my car right now. Let me know thumbs up or thumbs down if this level of volume is okay for everybody. That's not good. Well, I will try and fix this.
Do you want me to move on until you, or do you have one?
Yeah, I can try something here real quick, Desiree, and see if this works.
Okay.
I don't know that it's going to. I'm assuming the volume's still really low.
That sounds a lot better.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, so I will start, and I will try not to take a ton of time. Like Nicole, I am extremely passionate about this topic, so I could go on literally for hours. I think this is such an under discussed topic, freight movement, commercial motor vehicle safety and enforcement. So
I'm going to go kind of start with a high level overview of what I'm responsible for. I am the project manager for the Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Program. That's funded through Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. And essentially, it's the statewide commercial enforcement, operational enforcement strategy, training, industry outreach, and anything that has to do with commercial motor vehicle safety and enforcement. I also am the program manager for the waste isolation pilot plant, which is all of the Category 1 nuclear waste shipments that come out of Lawrence Livermore. They transverse I-80, making their way down to Carlsbad, New Mexico, where they're stored. So all of the operational planning for those movements, funding for the static trainings that we do, everything that is surrounding those movements. And then I also am the program manager for the statewide overdimensional overweight enforcement plan with a partnership with the Department of Transportation. So those are three of the main programs that I oversee statewide. I also sit on the State Emergency Response Commission as a commissioner for that. So all of the county funding for emergency response, I sit on that commission as well. So when we're talking specifically, all of the challenges that the group so far, Nicole has touched on, from an enforcement standpoint, we have to try and mitigate that every day. Our two main priorities are trying to keep that industry and keep that freight moving and efficient, but also enforce the trucks and the drivers that are operating unsafe. So it's a very complicated challenge to try and screen and identify the amount of volume that the state sees now and pinpoint the most nefarious carriers and drivers and take enforcement action upon them while maintaining the drivers and carriers that are doing the right thing and keeping them moving along our highways. So it's a very complicated challenge. And then from a staffing standpoint, we currently are operating at roughly a 50% vacancy statewide for our commercial vehicle inspectors. I know the traffic troopers statewide are in a similar situation because of the advanced training that our CVE staff have to go through. It's even more challenging to try and get and maintain certified inspectors on the road. So ways that we're trying to navigate that is to make them as efficient as possible by way of technology and using data-driven information to pinpoint where the worst problems we're having and appropriate our staff to those locations, and then capitalize on some technology advancements through the weigh in motion system, tire anomaly detection. We just recently launched the first of its kind in Nevada with a mobile screening van down in Las Vegas, where we can now set up at roadside or check site and screen DOT numbers, hazmat placards, registration, look at federal safety scores that the carrier and the drivers have, again, in an effort to make that targeted enforcement as efficient as possible. And then when we shift over to inspection stations and truck parking, we're trying to collaborate with DOT right now and look at, currently Nevada does not have any fixed ports of entry or static weigh scale houses. So we're looking with DOT to do a two-pronged approach to upfit some of those locations, mainly along I-15 and I-80 with the advanced e-screening technology, static in-ground scales, and then also kind of modeling after what Florida Highway Patrol has done. They've seen a lot of success with truck parking at their enforcement locations. And the feedback that we've received from Florida Highway Patrol is the industry initially was a little taken back by parking at a enforcement location with the thought that, you know, they go to park, get some rest and wake up and there's an inspector there to do an inspection. And through that industry outreach and education, it really shifted the mindset in Florida from an industry standpoint that these locations were there to offer a safe haven. And if they were inspected coming in. If they spent the night, they were not inspected on the way going out. So Florida's seen some really good progress with that. And so we're looking at a bunch of different states that have very robust programs from an inspection facility standpoint, as well as truck parking, and see how we can kind of marry the two together, given the fact that Nevada is so diverse in its roadway system and whatnot. So one of the other programs, and I see it listed there that I forgot to touch on, is the Innovative Technology Deployment. That's a program that's a competitive grant process through Federal Motor Carrier to capitalize on some of these technology advancements that I've spoken about briefly. So again, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds because I could literally go on for hours. I do really support this group and the effort that we're doing. The lady that spoke about Tahoe, I can tell you, I was in the command center for the Caldor fire, the Tamarack fire. I've worked in operations for 15 years in the Reno Carson area. So when it comes to the commercial vehicle traffic in and around Tahoe, especially in the winter during the weather, major fires, things like that, I can tell you from firsthand experience, it is extremely hard to mitigate when those things happen. So a lot of the efforts that we're trying to do at the patrol from a industry safety and outreach standpoint, we just about 6 months ago stood up a program with one of our partners, DriveWise, where we have in-cab safety messages that go direct to the truck's electronic logging device. It requires no input from the driver whatsoever. We have 200 locations throughout the state and an unlimited ability to send safety campaign messages directly to the truck. So up here in the Reno area on I-80 in the winter when Caltrans closes I-80, we all know if we live in this area, truck traffic backs up clear into Reno. So we're looking at using this type of technology and geofence locations out by Nightingale, Fernley, Winnemucca to advise of these closures. Make sure you have chains, make sure you travel in the right lane, any type of safety messaging that we feel is appropriate. That's just one of the programs that we've recently stood up to try and help this effort statewide. So I'm gonna taper from there and open it up to some questions, because like I said, I could go on and on for hours about this, but we are actively excuse me, we are actively pursuing looking at our inspection facilities, partnering with DOT, and trying to capitalize on technology and make our staff as efficient as possible. And then as well with the outreach through the Nevada Trucking Association and stakeholders that are on this meeting, have that collaborative effort to make sure that the industry not only moves efficiently and safely, but that from an enforcement standpoint, we're also trying to keep everybody on our highways safe through that enforcement effort. And with that, any questions that the group has?
Anybody have any questions? Michelle?
Hi, I'm a driver, and I think when we're talking about the emergency stoppage at Donner, when we have to park, when we start backing up past Fernley, east of Fernley, sometimes there's such a little window to get over Donner. We're already 50, 60 miles out. We can't even hit that window. So that whole group of trucks that's backed up past Fernley are going to get to Donner and it's going to close again. And so preferably, if there's going to be stoppage, it would have to be between Reno and the bottom of the mountain. There's an area there that holds a few trucks. I think Cabela's is mostly in that parking lot now, but yeah, when we get pushed back that far, and Donner can go on for days, and you have like a 3-hour window that they're actually letting you chain up and go, we just can't even get there, right? Because we got to get through town. And so I think when we look at that emergency parking for Donner, it has to be a little bit closer. It has to be like west of Reno if any's available. I know that it's a small space right there, but and also the scales with parking are awesome as long as they're well lit. The general public doesn't pull in them like rest areas because they do also fear police presence. So as long as they're well lit with, our freight is safer. And as long as they have like trash and porta-johns or whatever for us to use, it's excellent parking. It's a great idea.
No,
And that's,
thank you for that. Michelle,
yeah.
sorry, cut you off.
No, thank you. Thank you for speaking. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. And you bring up a couple really good points. I appreciate the feedback regarding from a driver's perspective with the inspection station / potential truck parking overnight. So that's good feedback. Thank you for that. And then the challenge that you discuss regarding Donner, it's very real. And that's one of our hopes with that ELD safety messaging is that through some data, we just received it. So, and this winter wasn't horrific, but what our intent is to try and get ahead of that curve well in advance of Reno, so we can coordinate with Caltrans, with CHP up at Truckee, with NHP and DOT, and get that messaging out to the drivers in advance. Because once you get to your point west of Reno and you start going up the hill, it bottlenecks. And then all it takes is, one semi that jackknifes and blocks both the travel lanes. It hinders DOT's ability to get through with plows and other apparatus to keep the road open. And then there's limited space for chain up areas. So, or a lot of people don't know that chains are required. So we're really, really hoping that safety messaging, having the ability to go well east of Fernley and start getting that information out in real time will help. Another key point in that, and some of you may be familiar, last year we had a lithium battery fire on the California side that impacted travel on I-15. And this messaging system has an emergency function where we can actually drop a pin across state lines into California. One of the things that we learned from that closure for 44 hours is it inundated I-40 with truck traffic. It was during the middle of the summer, so it put a huge cramp on emergency resources. People were overheating, cars were running out of gas and diesel, people were becoming dehydrated. And so again, with this messaging service, if we had it at the time, we could drop a pin in Nevada, provide there's an emergency ahead, seek alternate route and things like that to try and at least, it doesn't help with the passenger car traffic, but turning around a passenger car is much simpler than turning around a 80,000 pound commercial vehicle. So that's, again, one other area that we're trying to utilize that technology.
Yeah, I think the signage ahead of time is very appreciated. Then we can choose if we want to take a 10 outside that area, we can stop and get our break and try again instead of getting pushed into a line. And then with these ELDs, you can run out of time if it's only like 3 hours, right? Or 4 hours. And we can pre-plan, but also in Colorado, they do inspections for chains and at their scales. And I'm not opposed to that. I'm not opposed to safety checks and all this, and them checking going across 70 at Vail and stuff. They physically check you for chains. So if you don't chain up, or if you don't have chains, you don't get to go. I mean, flat out, no accidents, you don't go. They just stop them there, and that's not a bad thing for Donner. I know some drivers would complain, but that would, definitely stop the no chainers or people that actually look at you and say they didn't know, because they do know. They do know.
Well, we certainly appreciate the feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Michelle. I'm going to kind of whip through the rest of these because my battery is dying on my computer. So thank you very much for that presentation. And I'm going to just move on really quickly.
I'm going to put my contact information in the chat. If anybody wants to reach out directly, feel free at any time. And thank you.
Okay, awesome. So I'm just going to move on really quickly. Nicole covered a lot of the stuff, so that's great. Trucks on the road are equal to strong economy. Truck drivers do spend between $300 and $700 a day on diesel, fuel, food, household items, pet products. They require access to bathrooms, laundry, and shower facilities when they stop. They might not spend it all at one location because they might stop for fuel in the afternoon and then stop for dinner somewhere else. They do have a long break and a short break. Nicole went over Jason's Law. It is part of the Moving Ahead for Progress in the 21st Century, MAP 21. It is part of the transportation law now. There's 4 reasons for truck, or 5 reasons really. Staging for strict appointment times that the shippers and receivers dictate. Drivers can be fined if they're early. They can be fined if they're late. They have their 10-hour sleeper break. There's a little bit of flexibility with that, but a minimum of 7. The 30-minute break that we talked about, emergencies that we've been talking about, and also home time. So traditional truck parking locations are truck stops, travel centers, but states have increasingly had difficulty keeping public rest areas open due to the maintenance costs, which we've also went over. And in Nevada, we still have a lot of rural areas. There's no electricity. There's no modern restroom facilities. And for the state to construct that, the costs are very, very high to bring electric out there. And it's also a really long timeline. It takes over 2 years. So the time frame to improve some of these sites, the private sector can move much faster. And we kind of saw that where we had a project that was planned for I-15, and it was planned like 3 years ago. And now there's a Terribles out there. So it's kind of like solve the problem for us, because there's a new Terribles out there with 24 spaces. And now the drivers would actually have fuel, food, restroom facilities, and they could move a lot faster than the state can to deliver these kinds of projects. So like I mentioned before, drivers, they're very brand loyal. They will go where they have a fuel discount. So they use apps and they use their fuel discount cards, and they utilize those fuel points to get free coffee, a free shower. Sometimes they'll save them up to pay for paid parking. So they do tend to go to the same brands over and over because of those fuel points that they're getting. A new study came out recently talking about public-private partnerships. It didn't have a lot of information on how to achieve that, and it didn't go into the rest area ban that you can't have privatization on the rest areas. So it didn't, it's something that everybody wants to do, public-private partnerships, but there's not a real good roadmap on how to do it. Nicole talked about Lehigh Valley, and I'm going to kind of plug them too, because they've kind of been a leader on how community planning and local zoning can work with, people that are coming into the area through economic development to think about truck parking before they start building, and having off-peak zones within distribution center clusters. So this little tool that I have put on here is actually a little spreadsheet if anybody would like it. It's a simple truck parking estimation tool that you can put a NAICS code in, and it gives you better information on how many trucks you can expect would be parking because of that kind of business, if that makes sense. So I have a copy of that spreadsheet. It's really simple to use. So these are kind of examples at Lehigh Valley, how they put truck parking within the industrial park. And then another example where they used zoning during off-peak periods to let the trucks park, and then they'd be out of there during business hours. This is a Love's Travel Stop example. They wanted to have more truck parking spaces. The city said, I think they wanted to build like 10. I think somebody from Love's might be on here. Correct me if I'm wrong. But anyway, they ended up being able to put in 100 spaces because they worked with the Colorado DOT on a P3-like collaboration. The DOT replaced the bridge structure. The city came in and helped with land, and the electric energy company gave a grant so that they could put conduit in the ground for future electrification. So that was really thinking ahead. Love's also has something unique. They have a submit a location on the real estate section of their website where if you know that there's an area that could really use truck parking, you can go submit a location to them and they'll consider it. Non-traditional places to park are family restaurants and Native American casinos. This restaurant's a family restaurant that offers a CDL discount to drivers. It's out by Glendale on I-15 North. And this is an example from Elmira, New York, where they took an old park and ride and they put a kiosk in there and they charged a very reasonable $5 a day fee, $30 a week. And that I recently spoke to the city manager. Well, last year I talked to him. He said, since this has been in operation over 10 years, the money they've collected just from that nominal fee has allowed them to resurface it and restripe it. They have not had any problems with trash. We talked a little bit about truck parking paid for spots. This is actually owned by Station Casinos at Tropicana and I-15. This is how much they're making on the spots. They charge $450 a month. They do not allow daily parking though. So there is kind of a place for paid parking for drivers that are on their home time to park their trucks in a safe place. This is kind of on the high side, $450, but it's because of the location so close to the strip that they're able to charge that much. So finally, in our freight investment plan, we have changed some of our priorities from our last meeting. I'm trying to go through this a little because we're going over on time. All of the projects do have to go through the One Nevada prioritization process. It's a multi-step process that ensures the most impactful, feasible projects make it into the freight investment plan. And so since our last meeting in December, we've had some projects change, and 3 of them are to add way in motion fixed facilities, which Lieutenant Cornmesser spoke about the need in Nevada. That put them down there at the bottom. Also some truck climbing lanes and then the T-Pass. And in our last meeting, there was some discussion on wanting to know a little bit more about where those locations are. So we're going to be asking for your input on this. You're going to get the slides after this. This is a map of those projects. The blue ones are truck climbing lanes. The yellow ones are the T-Pass projects. There are 11 sites. They're in both directions except for one at Trinity, and that's only in one direction. And then the red diamonds are the 3 weigh-in motions that are being added. I'm not going to go into T-Pass too much because Nicole already talked about it, but it's basically technology detection to tell truck drivers on these signs how far the next truck parking and how many spaces are available. We would like to kind of explore in Nevada adding public and private facilities. This is on I-94 where they use both public and private facilities on the signs. Some people or some private facilities are not interested in being in the system, but some are. It helps drive more business to their properties. And because Nevada's having a hard time improving some of our public facilities and they're not going to have electricity or food or fuel or some of the amenities drivers need, we are interested in finding public stakeholders that would be interested in knowing more about T-Pass. So that brings us to the Mentee poll. I'm going to share my screen for this. I don't know if I have to unshare, but I have to give a warning that I'm in a meeting room right now and it doesn't have a plug for my computer and it's telling me that my battery's running down. So I'm just giving fair warning right now. Can you see the Mentee poll on your screen? Everyone?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a QR code on there, or you can go to the website mentee.com and put in this code. And there's 3 questions. I sent the questions to people in advance. I don't know if you had a chance to look at them. And just let me know if you're on there or not. And I'm just going to advance to the next slide, which has the first question. So as we're thinking about public-private partnerships for the state to expand truck parking capacity, what key deliverables, in your opinion, should a research study include? And I am going to, while you're doing that, go back to my desk and plug in. Hi, can you guys hear me? I can't get the hearing, I can't get the thing to go on my computer. And so I can't advance the slide on the other side. So I'm trying to get the thing, and I know you guys are anxious to get off of this. So we collected a lot of answers on the Menti poll for the first question. Let me see if you'll bear with me for the last. Can you still hear me? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
So, okay, you guys got the second Menti question then with the rest area sign?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's the last one. And this will be open for a few days if you want to come back to it and add ideas after the meeting. And I'm just going to do this last one so we can wrap up. What topics would you like to see at future FAC meetings? I don't have any responses on that. Did anybody respond to that question?
I did.
Oh, okay. Right. And like I said, we're gonna be sending you the slides and you can still respond to these questions after the meeting. So I'm gonna wrap it up here because I know we went over and I apologize for that. Our contact information, if you need to get a hold of any of us about this, or if you have any other questions about the meeting, you can get a hold of myself or Murph. we're gonna ask for your input on the freight investment plan that we skimmed over. It's pretty brief. Let me see if I've got my. By June 1st, and then this is our contact information. So that wraps up for everybody. Thank you for bearing with me. Thank you, Nicole and Tappan, for your presentations, and everybody for joining and your questions. Taking this time out. Okay. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.